Hey, you guys, welcome back to Speak Out with Christine Jurgen. Today's episode gets incredibly real, raw. It is powerful. It is heavy at times. I want to give you a trigger warning if you happen to be post-abortive. I say trigger warning, but at the same time, I think everybody needs to listen to it because people need to know the reality of abortion. But I also understand that there have been people who are post-abortive or who've had abortions who are still healing right now and might find some of the things that they're going to hear a little bit troubling. And I don't want anybody going into this not knowing that there are some very real and raw moments that our guest shares today. Today we have on, you may know her as Patriot Barbie. Her name is Lindsey Graham. If you remember back in the COVID era, there was this woman all over the news who reopened her salon when the government was shutting everything down. And it was like, mom reopened salon or woman reopened salon in defiance of the shutdowns. And it was literally national, global news even during the shutdowns. And she is now an outspoken person who talks about all of her beliefs, really, but especially about the pro-life movement. And she speaks against abortion, which we very much value her. Lindsey has her own podcast called Patriot Barbie Podcast. She has written a book called Targeted. She has her own clothing line and merch that she sells. She's got wine. I mean, every guest I have on is seriously a jack of all trades in some way, shape, or form. And I'm like, what am I doing? I should probably be ramping it up quite a bit more. But she's an entrepreneur who is just knocking it out of the park. And she is unashamed of her pro-life beliefs. And I've heard her sharing her story a lot more recently and sharing her pro-life beliefs a lot more recently. So I wanted to have her on because I think it's powerful and it touched me. And I listened. I was like, wow, this needs to be shared even more. So I think you guys will love today's episode. But again, it does get very, very real and raw. So I hope that you are prepared for it and send it to anybody that you think that it would help and that anybody you think needs to listen to this because it's a story that needs to be told. Women and men need to hear this. And it shows the reality of abortion and what it is. And we don't need to hide it necessarily, but it is difficult to hear sometimes. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. Well, Lindsey, thank you so much for joining me on Speak Out. I'm delighted to have you. I remember hearing about you a long time ago, but I didn't even know to put two and two together when I met you, who you were. I was like, I knew this lady in the news, and then I met you, and then turns out you are this lady in the news from the COVID era. So for everybody listening, tell us what happened, because you were really thrown under the bus big time. And the government kind of targeted you.
Yes. Ooh, Christine, that was perfect. The name of my book is Targeted. So I don't know how you did that, but it is.
There we go.
Yeah. So in Oregon in 2020, my husband and I owned 6 businesses, 4 tanning salons, my salon, which had 25 girls, and a gym. The short version of it is that we had just invested all of our money into my salon in its permanent location, his gym, and we were kind of ready to smooth sail. We had 3 kids, built a new house. Everything was great. And then, of course, in 2020, the government shut everybody down. So we complied for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks, and then 5 weeks. And then at 6 weeks, we were looking at our finances going, okay, we have no money coming in. We have mortgages and rents that are not being paid. If we stay shut down, we are most likely going to go bankrupt. We'll have to start literally selling off our possessions. For people that have worked really hard as entrepreneurs our whole lives, my salon for 15 years, just starting to sell off our belongings because the government said you don't have a right to do hair, even though Costco can be open and Walmart can be open. It didn't feel right at all to me. I wasn't political. I honestly wasn't very close to God at this point. I wasn't consulting him about my life. But something was not sitting right. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to work. I'm going to open my salon. I'm going to do hair. I'm going to bring money in. At least it'll kind of keep us going, hopefully for a while until whatever the government says we can open up. And turns out that was a big deal. Reopening against the mandate. I was probably the second or third in America. And it wasn't really the fact that I reopened that it became global news. It was more what the government did to me throughout the period of me defying the lockdowns And, for 10 days straight, I was completely tormented. They threatened to take my business license, kick me out of my building, issue me a Class C misdemeanor, throw me in jail, $50,000 a day fines. I ended up getting a $14,000 fine, and they sent CPS after my kids, Child Protective Services. And that is what put the nation in turmoil of this woman is being targeted again, for standing up for what I believe. Yeah. So that's that story.
Well, this wasn't even it sounds like it wasn't an even defiance thing. There's a lot of people who, and I am very much on the side of the government shouldn't be able to do a shutdown again. But it wasn't I'm going to open up because I want to be defiant. It's I need to be able to feed my family. I have 25 other employees who also probably need a job and money coming in at some point too. But I need to be able to work because I need a paycheck, because I can't just continue to sell everything off. I mean, nobody's going to want to buy anything in the COVID time anyway, because they don't know when things are going to go back open.
Right. Isn't that funny? I remember that being the case where restaurants could be open. So I was still closed as a hairstylist. Trying to do 1 to 2 clients was not allowed, but Walmart was open. Okay. So 500 people at a time were flocking there. Restaurants were allowed to be opened, but they could only do takeout. And everyone was on social media saying, go support your restaurant, go buy their food, keep them open. And I was like, people don't have money. We're all locked down too. None of us can work. I remember thinking, I want to support these businesses, but I'm not even making a living. It was such a weird time, right?
Yeah. There was even a period of time where they had bars open where it was you can be open so long as you sell food. Right. So then they'd sell chips and salsa or sell French fries or something just so the bar could be open. I remember that here in Colorado. And then they had takeout alcohol and all this other stuff where I'm thinking, this is just a joke at this point. Let's just move on. And doing hair, so long as you're doing hair safely, they're faced away from you. It was such a scam anyway. But it's terrifying to see what happened to you and how you were targeted, because I saw with the claims, the CPS claims, they were completely unsubstantiated from what I read. And I'm thinking, that's really scary that they can go that far. Yeah. When it comes to the issue of life, it's between a woman and her doctor, and they always trust women to make their own choices. But in this case, all of a sudden they have to take your kids from you. Over something that is just completely made
That is such a great point. No one has ever made that point before. Oh, it's my body, my choice. I'm educated, smart, and well-versed enough to know what's right for me. But as soon as I have a kid, CPS is right there telling us what we can and can't do. Right. Interesting point.
Right. What's right for you, what's right for your body, what's right for the child in your body. Obviously, if you choose abortion, you think that that's right. But God forbid a woman actually make a decision to support her family and earn a paycheck. That's insane to me that we had that. So that was a really intense time that you went through with the government. I mean, how did you guys survive that? Mentally, that must have taken an extreme toll on you. I mean, you say that you weren't as close to God then. I'm assuming maybe you are now.
Well, like I said, I wasn't very spiritual back then, but thank goodness that I was raised in a Christian home. And so I did have faith. I had deep-seated faith. And I actually got canceled more than anything. Worse than fighting the government, I got cancel cultured. So we got death threats. My kids got death threats. I was scared to go to the salon. I was scared to go out in my town, wondering these extreme leftists were just so hateful and then coming after me. And I had to sit back and watch my whole life fall apart before my eyes. And if I didn't have Jesus, I don't know what that would have meant. So we watched that happen. We lost everything, mostly to cancel culture. And I had I had to really dig into my inner faith, and that I believed that I was going through a persecution, a trial, and probably a test. And I knew that I was going to pass. I knew that I was going to give God glory for whatever was going on. And this was so bad. I can speak about it now. I tell people a lesser person would have committed suicide. It was very, very dark, very deep. The hate was very extreme. Vile messages and emails and phone calls coming in all the time. And I believe God created me the way that he did to be able to endure that, because, it took, some layers off of me for a while. And then the Lord just revealed to me that I was his child, and that when someone says something about you that isn't true, it's not really an insult, because if it's not true, it doesn't mean anything. And as we sat there and lost everything, my dad had moved to Arizona. My mother-in-law was moving to Arizona, and she said, I think you guys should move. I think you should get out of here. And we were like, we have nothing left here anymore. This is crazy. Let's go. And so I told God, in a very profound, memorable moment, I trust that what you did here is for my good. I believe that you didn't take my home and take my livelihood and take 6 businesses and move us out of states. We lose all these friends for nothing. I believe you have something bigger. And that was the moment that my faith really took a turn. And I said, I have no choice, thank you, Lord, but to put my whole life in your hands, because I don't have control of any of this.
Yeah, I can imagine your family is a lot stronger now. That's such a tough place to be when you feel all of that. And I have not experienced anything to that degree by any means, but I know people will say, like, how do you deal with the hate from pro-abortion activists, or how do you deal with family members or friends giving you pushback? And like you said like, if somebody is saying something to you, but it's not true, then it doesn't hold any merit. It doesn't hold any weight. I mean, if I tell you your hair is blue and I look at you and your hair is brown, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's exactly like that. If they're like, you're a hateful bigot, racist, transphobe, whatever. And you're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I'm just a person and I see right and wrong, and that's it. And these are my beliefs. You have to kind of just be able to push what they say aside. But that's hard to do sometimes, especially when it's coming at you and coming at you and coming at you. It can take a toll on you after a while. So I love that your family has grown from it, and that you have come out stronger, and your relationship with God is stronger. I mean, it's what the devil meant for evil, God is able to use for good, and he has in your life, which is really, really beautiful. And you've been able to kind of transition into being somewhat of a commentator and sharing your thoughts and beliefs on all sorts of topics, not just, the government shutdowns and hair or anything like that. You're kind of talking about a little bit of everything now. And recently you've been talking about being pro-life. I've seen you've been doing some stuff with Choices Pregnancy Center in Arizona. What have you been doing with them specifically? Because I've seen you guys have partnered up.
Yeah. So I attend a lot of their events and promote their clinics as much as I can. It's all very organic too. They certainly don't pay me to post about their clinics. It's just something I very much believe in. I'm friends with Josh Chumley. He's the Chief Advancement Officer. And, I went and took a tour of one of the clinics, and I got to see what they do and how they do it. And one of the things that I really love about Choices is that it's a judgment-free area. And that's really, really hard to do as Christians, because if you think a woman is considering killing her baby, you just want to shake her and be like, oh my gosh, don't even consider this. It's the worst decision ever. But you have to handle those people with grace and with Jesus love. Yeah. And if you give them too much Jesus love, well, they're not going to come, because they don't want to be, they don't want it shoved down their throat. They don't want to be felt to be shamed, So they play a very balanced, delicate role where they try really hard to save babies without putting too much pressure on these mothers. And then the great thing is too, that if a mother goes and gets an abortion, they will counsel her afterwards. And so I think that's huge, because one of the things that people aren't talking about is that how bad abortion is for the woman involved as well.
Isn't that beautiful? Like, what I see a lot of people say when we're talking about the pregnancy centers, people they just pressure you, and they're using their religion, and they're these hateful people, and they trap you, and they don't let you out unless you choose life. And I've heard so many different things, but I'm like, have you walked into one? Have you ever been to a pregnancy resource center? Because you walk into one, I guarantee you'll feel the most love you've ever felt in your entire life. Yep. And they're the most giving, kind people. I mean, I like to think that I'm a kind, compassionate person, but I'm telling you what, those people at the pregnancy centers are above and beyond, just would give the shirt off their back, kindest people I have ever met on the planet. And so I'm glad you've actually been to one, because a lot of people haven't. Like, even if they are pro-life, they're like, yeah, I'm pro-life, this is wrong, but they don't even know how to offer resources to somebody. But that's something you're using your platform to do.
Right. Well, and yeah, so that's, part of what I would consider my ministry, because when everything happened that happened in 2020 and God rewrote my story, it became very clear that he was going to elevate my voice for whatever reason. And at the time, of course, I thought it was freedom fighting. And then I thought it was, politics. And I went through a series of like an identity crisis trying to figure out, okay, well, I no longer do hair and I don't live in Oregon and I don't have the same life at all. Who am I? And thank God that he was like, I got you. I sat down and wrote my book. And I believe more than I was supposed to write a book for book sales, I was supposed to write a book because I needed to address the things in my life that God had used to prepare me for, I believe, who I'm supposed to be in this time. And that is someone who was raised Christian, knows right and wrong, knew right and wrong when I made wrong decisions, made them anyway, because I was deceived and I was young and I was stupid. And what's the point of that if I don't use my platform to try to save other people from making those terrible decisions? And so I've been through a lot, an abusive relationship, which he's the one that forced me to get an abortion. I tried to commit suicide after my abortion. I was a drug addict. I was a dancer. Like, I did the craziest stuff in like 4 years. I went from being this great Christian to being this radical, wild woman, and then came back to the Lord and was like, what was the point of that? What was the point of, 5 years of terrible, wrong decisions that just broke my heart and caused me grief and anger and pain? And I believe it's because now I can speak with authority. And as God elevates my platform, I don't want to be an influencer that poses next to pools, drinking a margarita, wearing the cute bikini of the year. I want to be somebody who makes a difference in the world and use my experiences to save other women from this kind of heartache.
What good is a platform if you don't use it for good, right?
Exactly. Oh, and yep. And I tell God every day.
It only brings vanity otherwise.
Yeah. I don't need to be worshiped. I don't need to be looked at. I don't need to be lusted at. I don't need to be told I'm pretty or funny or any of that stuff. It's like, if I'm doing what needs to be done, I believe that what God's calling me to do, then I'd rather hear him say, well done, good and faithful one. So I have some fun stuff on my Instagram. I'm a normal person too, but I try to stay like, there's a message.
Totally. I agree. And then we love you for that, because, when you are using it for good, people see where your heart is. And I think that's what people are drawn to. And then they become loyal fans of you and what you do, and they trust you, and you can speak into their lives with positivity, with, faith, with all of that stuff. Yep. But you mentioned you were forced to have an abortion by a man who was in your life at the time. Tell me about that.
So I was exactly what textbooks say domestic violence victims are. Very, very in a vicious cycle of, he somehow convinced me that I was worthless. And so because I was worthless, I was bound to him because he was the only one that could take me because I was worthless. I endured emotional, physical, and verbal abuse from him for about 3 years. I think it was about 1.5 years in that I got pregnant with his child, and I was very pro-life. My senior debate in high school was on pro-life and why abortion is murder. And I was so manipulated by this man. I was so weak and so ashamed and so, I don't know how to explain that. I was like a shell of a person. I didn't know who I was because the only person that I was whoever he said I was. And he wasn't saying very nice things. And so when I got pregnant with his child, I thought, well, this will be a way for us to turn things around, because he had been abusive to me in all the ways. And I thought, well, once I have his baby, he'll look at me with the kind of love and adoration of a woman that's carrying his child. Well, he didn't. Of course, it was more like, well, this is your fault. What did you do? It's funny now because I'm like, oh, the tactics just they don't make sense. And yet I was falling for them. He was supposed to be a Christian. And of course, I was supposed to be a Christian as well. But his only response to the baby was that we basically needed to get rid of it, that I needed to have an abortion. He didn't want his community to know that he wasn't this perfect man, and he had gotten a woman pregnant before marriage. I mean, his whole story, you would almost need a full hour to try to get into this man's head and how messed up he was. But his solution to this was, if I had an abortion, then we could turn around and do things right? The way that he wanted people to see them. We could get married and then we could have a family. It would be perfect. It's perfect. Let's do it that way. And my manipulated, fragile, young 20, I can't remember if I was 21 or 22. And I try not to go back and timeline it, was so naive and weak that I was like, okay, that's a good solution. Then it's gone. It's like it never happened. It's going to be a mess otherwise. And then I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And then he just kept, if you have this baby, I'm going to make sure that the court takes it. You're a drug addict, or you were a drug addict. You were a dancer. You're an unfit mother. I'll make sure you never see your child. Well, and that was even more terrifying. He just went through phases of threats to the point where eventually he booked me an abortion appointment and said, you just need to do this and we'll make everything right afterwards. And I just kind of had given up at that point. The threats were so severe and I just didn't know what to do. And I don't need to even go into, I feel like I'm trying to explain it away to myself because that person did not know what she was doing. And I'm sad that somebody made me that weak to where I made that decision. But it was swept under the rug as if it was no big deal. It was painted to me like it wouldn't hurt. It would just be over with and then I could move on with life. And that's the lie that women are told. Once you do it, you've fixed the problem, whatever the problem is: money, an abusive spouse, a lack of home, a lack of job, whatever this baby is, your problem, abortion will fix it. And then you can move on. And that's just not true. I never moved on. I will never move on.
It's completely not true. And God's grace is abundant. And you obviously know you have a relationship with him now. You know, you're forgiven. You know that this story too can be used for good, just like what happened in Oregon, and that this can help other women and help save lives. And you can say, hey, I've been there. I've been in your shoes. This is what it does. You don't want to go down this path. I think in my situation, I can help women to some degree because I did have an unplanned pregnancy. And, though I had a different outcome, I think your situation, and I don't know if you know Toni McFadden by chance, she's also somebody who speaks out on the issue of abortion. She had one herself. I feel like it comes with so much more power because it's like, I've been there.
Yeah.
I've done that. I've had that. I can tell you exactly what it's like. I can tell you what it did. I can tell you what I saw. I can tell you what I felt. And you don't want to go down that path. And I think that that's something that is going to help an eternity of people. And you won't even know how many people that you've helped by sharing your story, from sharing it on your own Instagram, from sharing it on this podcast, from giving speeches. You won't even know the amount of lives that you've touched and potentially even saved. And I think that that's something so beautiful because it could be endless. It could be somebody hearing your story and then they go out and they're witnessing to someone after hearing your story. It could be somebody who was pregnant listening to your story. It could be somebody listening to this podcast. I think that this is going to be used for good.
I know.
And I feel that very strongly. And something you were sharing when I saw a video of you on your own social media, you were talking about the horrors of abortion and the reality of what you experienced during the actual abortion. Do you feel comfortable sharing that?
Yeah. So my first horror was really in the clinic because it was just so sterile. Nobody would talk to each other. It's like everybody secretly knew, and I'm talking patients and doctors and nurses. It's like everybody secretly knew we're all here to do something that we shouldn't be doing. There's no joy. There's no camaraderie. There's no, oh, hey, what are you here for? It's like, I'm here to kill my baby. What are you here for? It was just so dark and gloomy. And I sat there and I, as a Christian, I knew that what I was doing was wrong. I didn't know how to get myself out of it. I ended up actually kind of having a meltdown in the clinic, and the girl next to me said, let me get a doctor. I think you need more medication or something. So the response to me having a meltdown and saying that I didn't want to do what I was doing, and yet there I was doing it anyway, was let's calm her down by giving her some more meds. And so they did. Yeah. They gave me more meds. I kind of was out of it for the rest of the appointment. It did hurt. They said it wouldn't hurt. I remember it hurting. It's like they say it won't hurt so that they can hurt you very badly. And then when it's over, go, see, that didn't hurt, you know? But it did, it hurt. And, when I left there, I mean, the regret was immediate. It was immediate. I was never shown a picture of my ultrasound. I was simply told how far along I was. My horror went extra deep because the man who made this appointment for me and drove me there and did not stay with me, left, but showed up in time to pick me up. The first thing he said to me when I left was, I can't believe you went through with it. Like, he took me there, forced me into it. I did it against everything that I knew was wrong, and then shamed me as soon as he picked me up. And the shame continued. I mean, it actually made my life harder doing this, because then I went from being an ex-drug addict, unfit mother, ex-stripper to, well, now you're a woman that kills your own baby. And so my horror was just amplified by this abusive person as well. But it was slowly a way that I was disconnecting with him, because it's like the Lord was starting to reveal who he was and what I had gotten my life into by being with this man. And I ended up separating, or we ended up just kind of starting to separate ourselves a little bit. I think obviously something like this tears a couple apart. We were being slowly torn apart. There was endless screaming fights every night about this subject. And eventually he didn't understand what it did to me. I mean, he didn't understand at all. And he thought it was time to move on and stop talking about it and get over it. And I was not over it. And I am still not over it. And because of the abortion, I actually ended up trying to commit suicide one night, a little bit because of my shame and guilt, but also because I was reaching out to him to try to talk to me about this so that we could get through it. And he wanted nothing to do with me because of what he had forced me to do. Again, I believe God was like, I'm here. Like, come to me. I can offer you peace and forgiveness. And, I wasn't reaching out to God. I was reaching out to a person who is flawed. But another, part of the experience that was really hurtful was when the clinic sends you home, they kind of send you home with, you'll cramp a little bit. This will happen. Maybe your period will get messed up. There's some things still left over in there that you're going to have to exude, or whatever the beautiful medical terminology that they use to gaslight us. But, what I recall is going home, and as things were coming out of me in the toilet, feeling like they missed part of my baby, and it was my baby. Like, little pieces of it were coming out. So it wasn't like I went to the clinic and it was done and over and I never saw anything again. I had to go home by myself and see the residual physical side effects of what had happened inside my body, which is that at one point there was a life there and now there's not. And in case I thought I could just go and get it removed, I could not. I had to come home and I had to watch it come out of me in the toilet. And I had accepted what I had done so much. Like, to me, it was never a clump of cells. It was never a fetus. It was a baby, which makes my abortion worse because I knew what I was doing, and yet I was so manipulated. I did it anyway. So as I sit in the bathroom looking at this stuff, I'm not stupid. I'm not saying, well, it's just a clump of cells that's coming out. Like, I'm looking at this going, that is the baby that I should be having. That's my child.
I'm so sorry. listen to your story and I think about you and I think about all of the women who have been lied to and manipulated or forced or coerced or bribed or pressured or given drugs so that they don't know what they're doing. I mean, it's beyond me that people will, for a profit, do this to women, do this to babies. And I hear you saying a lot of like almost reasoning through you're talking right now, saying like, I didn't know what I was doing. And I truly believe that you knew what you're doing, but you don't know what you're doing at the same time because you're in this lost place of, I am so broken right now. I have been so manipulated. I've been so torn down. I am a shell of a person. I'm not who I usually am. The spine of what we see today, where you rock anybody whose world who comes near you. You're like, back off of me and my family. People don't realize you can be broken down over time, and a manipulative man like that. And I know that there's plenty of people who've had relationships like this. One of my best friend, though I don't know how extreme it got at times because it got so serious where I had to step away. She had a boyfriend that was like that and very abusive mentally, physically, emotionally, and they start to fade away. You end up not even knowing that person anymore because they're not who they were. And I think your story is so incredibly powerful. It's why I wanted you to share it. When all of this happened, I don't know if you went to Planned Parenthood or if you went elsewhere, but did anybody even like follow up with you, check on you? Was there any sort of care that was given to you at all?
You know what? I did not go to Planned Parenthood. I don't recall which clinic I went to. I think I do, but I don't want to say it in case I'm wrong because I don't want to.
Sure.
I don't want to spread misinformation. I don't really remember. If I did, it would have been like, I'm not answering your calls. Like, you want to know how I am? I'm not good. This is not good. Yeah. I don't recall ever doing a follow-up with them, but at the same time, I probably was really, really pissed off at them. Like that. And that's the thing is what is the problem? What is the problem with telling women, if you, let's pretend that we even for a second think that it should be a choice, which I don't. What is the problem with saying, if you don't have a job and you don't have support and you can't afford this baby and you want to abort it, we understand that. We just need to tell you that this could have psychological effects and emotional effects later. Are you sure that you're prepared to remove a potential child from your life? Like, what is the problem with giving everyone the full story? That's what yes, you're risking that they're going to change their mind. Good. You're a doctor. You just saved a life. Like, isn't that your job? But what is the problem saying, listen, we've had millions of women regret this. So you really need to think about or talk to a woman that's had an abortion, that was in the worst situation ever. I didn't have a job. My spouse was abusive. My parents were not alive. Like, I was homeless. And find out, did she have an abortion and still regret it? Like, still. Why can't women have all the information? And then, you know what? The crazy psychopaths that don't give a crap, they're going to go have an abortion anyway. But at least some women like me would have been like, you're right. I don't believe in this. I shouldn't do this. What's another solution? You know what? I'm going to leave town and just disappear and tell him I got an abortion and never see him again. And then it'll be me and the baby and we'll be safe. Like, I wasn't given any options.
Well, outside, and part of informed consent is what you're talking about. It's like, hey, here's what could happen. Mm-hmm. Here, your uterus could be perforated. You could hemorrhage. There can be mental side effects. You could become suicidal. Mm-hmm. You could abuse. The rates at which people abuse drugs and alcohol afterwards skyrockets. All of those things should be told to someone. So if you're getting a heart surgery, you're asking every question. Yep. If you're going to have a brain surgery, you're asking all the questions. You're Googling. You're going to check it out. And doctors expect to answer all of these questions. But when it comes to abortion, it's like, no, we don't want to answer anything. Right. But aside from the informed consent aspect, it should be, have you been abused in any way, shape, or form? How can we support you and get you away from this abuser? Mm-hmm. How can we get you to a safe place so that you and your baby could potentially thrive? If you're experiencing financial difficulties. How can we support you so that I mean, to me, that is the most pro-woman thing.
Yep.
Don't say, oh, it sucks you have no money, you have to kill your baby.
Right.
Say, how can we help you and support you?
Yeah.
And then you choose, obviously abortion should never be an option, period. But if we're really pro-woman, and the pro-abortion people are really pro-woman, they say, let's get your finances under control. Let's help you. Let's support you. Let's get you a job if you're jobless. And then you decide.
Yeah.
Don't say you're jobless, you're broke, that sucks, let's kill your baby, and you go back to being jobless and broke. How does that help her? It doesn't help her. That's not pro-woman. That's not empowering her.
Nope.
And there's no way that you felt empowered by, anything they did. They didn't support you or ask if you were being abused.
No. And it's funny that you say like the side effects, even just as you're listing, like if you have heart surgery, they'll tell you what the risks are. You can watch a commercial for like a skin rash and they're like, side effects may include this. Right. You got to listen to that on the TV. But a woman walks in for an abortion and no one tells her you could regret this. It could break your heart. It could break your entire soul. You could have immense regret and remorse. You could mourn this the rest of your life. You could not. There's women that have had abortions and go live their normal life, but most women do not.
Yeah. Well, life is long, right? Just because you don't regret it at 30, 40, 50 doesn't mean you won't regret it at 60, 70, 80. There's a lot of times where we look back on things. I mean, I look back on things in my life and I'm like, oh, I probably should have done that differently. Yeah. I can imagine the older you get, there's a lot more that you're looking back on and you've become more mature and you've seen the world for what it really is. And, a lot of people, especially in their age, get more conservative too, and their values change and they see what's really important in life. It's not this Instagram world or reality TV that we're all addicted to, or being Insta famous or TikTok famous or anything. Like, it's family. It is our faith. Yep. It is those who are around us, who pour into us, that we need to be pouring into them too. Like, the things at which you care about become much smaller, I think, the older you get. And so then you look back on an issue like abortion and you're like, wow, I really could have had a son or a daughter or grandchildren here. And I have people very close to me who, are still mourning theirs. And even though they know that they're forgiven at this point in time, and there's women who are still contemplating having an abortion. And I wish I could help every single one of them. And there might even be somebody listening right now who just found out that they're pregnant, who maybe is pro-life or who maybe is conservative or Christian. I mean, I was pro-life. I grew up knowing abortion was wrong. I was Christian. I knew having premarital sex was wrong. I did it. And, it was something that was really tough for me. I mean, I ended up having to go to church without a ring on, and I had this big belly, and people knew that I wasn't married. People knew that I didn't have a boyfriend at the time, and that was something that was very shameful for me, knowing that I had to walk through that. And I can see how people say, I don't want to go through that. I don't want them to know. Or maybe you live in a small, southern town that, like, it's really, really frowned on there, and you're just scared of the judgment that you're going to get. But I promise anybody listening that the judgment is
it's tiny. It's nothing. It's nothing compared to the life of your child. Nothing.
Right. You forget about it. Yeah. And you learn from it, but you also learn who's really there for you, because there are people who will come alongside you and say, you know what, you did what you did. You asked for forgiveness, but now there's a precious life involved. Yep. And now there is a baby, and we're going to support you, and we're going to support this baby. And that's what we as a pro-life movement are doing. It's not this judgment of, you did this, let's keep shaming you and let's make you feel really bad. It's let us help you, support you and your baby. And, like, at the point that a woman is pregnant, she already knows that she's done something wrong if she's had premarital sex, or if she's not supposed to be pregnant and maybe she's 16 years old. I promise you, when they see that positive pregnancy test, they're like, okay. Oh, they feel it all. Yeah. There is no reason for us to be judging them in any way, shape, or form, except to saying, I am giving you a hand to lift you up, and I am here to help you. And I think that's exactly what you're doing with sharing your story, with talking out, or speaking out, I should say, because that's the name of the show. If you could tell a young girl who is maybe in this situation, maybe she's not even young, maybe she's even married, who is contemplating abortion, what would you tell them? How would you handle that?
I would say that I had lived most of my life being kind of a judgy person. I think I was a kind of a judgier Christian when I was younger. I had opinions on things that I had no experience in, right? And we shouldn't really have
Don't we all sometimes?
overly what?
I said, don't we all sometimes?
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't give ourselves the entitlement of thinking that we have authority to speak on something that we don't have any experience. And I believe that it was a humbling moment for me. My like I said, my debate was on pro-life, and I was stating fact after fact after fact. Well, guess what? It's not just facts; it's feelings too. And when a woman decides if she's having an abortion, a lot of the times she's never had a child. So my suggestion would be go speak to some mothers. I don't think you'll find a mother in this world that says, I wish I never would have had my kid. I don't, unless she's psychotic. I mean, really, unless she's a sociopath and mentally disturbed. You'll not find a woman who goes, I had my baby, even if they gave the baby up for adoption. There should not be a mother alive that says, I wish I never would have given birth to that kid. You will love your child no matter the circumstances. And you don't know it yet because you've never had one. But what happened with me is, of course, my regret was immediate and it was permanent. But when I started having kids, it got worse because I looked at my first son and when he came out and I was like, man, there is a someone that doesn't exist. There's another one of my children and he or she didn't get life. What does that baby's eyes look like? Which characteristics does that baby have? Well, that baby will never know. I'll never know. That baby never got to live. And now I think about, I wish someone would have told me, you'll never regret a child, no matter the circumstances. Even if your boyfriend is going to try to take that child from you or abuse you or whatever you have to do. You will never regret having your baby, but you are more than likely to regret, no matter what point in life, at some point, you are probably going to regret if you have an abortion and take the life of your child.
Do you think that if somebody had come alongside you and said, Lindsey, I am here to support you and I am here to help you in this moment with whatever you need, and we're going to make sure that your needs are met, do you think that would have changed the decision that you had made?
I think so. I needed tough love at that point. I was in my own brain. I was answering only to this man. My goal was to please him and do what he needed me to do to maintain our relationship. I wished, honestly, someone would have come along and kidnapped me and taken me away until I was full term and then presented me with a child. And I would have gone, okay, thank you so much for saving that. Thank you. That's extreme, but whatever needs to happen for a woman to give birth to her child, she'll never regret it. I don't know. Yeah, I could have used really strong, firm help. I could have used a solution. I was living life on my own. Like you said, he had alienated me from all my friends, a lot of my family. And so, yes, someone to come alongside me and say, just slap me almost and say, you know what you're doing is wrong and you're not going to do it. And here's how we're going to fix this.
Yeah. A lot of times I hear people on the pro-abortion side, they espouse that it's my body, my choice, or it's a woman's choice and you need to butt out of it. And I'm thinking, sometimes these women actually need support and help. And that's why I asked that question, because a lot of times when they hear, I'm here for you and I will help you with whatever you need, they do make a different decision. But somehow we're hateful and we're trying to force our beliefs on them just by saying, I'm here for you. What do you need? How can I help? I think some of those are some of the most powerful words. I'm here for you. What do you need? And how can I help?
Yeah.
And then a lot of times women open up and they're like, I really don't want to do this. I'm doing this because I can't afford groceries, because I can't afford daycare, because I can't afford the roof over my head, or maybe because I already have kids. I don't know how I'm going to support another one. None of those reasons are okay to kill a baby. Not being able to afford groceries is no reason to kill a baby. We can help you with groceries. We can help you with your car payment. We can help you with daycare. I mean, we will rally. And there are people who do that. I mean, I have people who beg me to find more women to help, and it is amazing. But I think it's wild that, it can be framed as this, woman's choice, butt out, don't say anything, when really these women, a lot of them are crying out for help. And we're just like, people tiptoe around it. Like, I can't say anything. I can't offer her help because
Right.
it's her choice. You know, a
Right.
lot of times we're harming women in that way, I think.
Yeah. And the pro-choice, I mean, the entire idea of it being a woman's body and a woman's choice, I completely disagree with. I do. I feel like I don't think women should have a choice because I wished I wouldn't have had a choice. I wished I wouldn't have had the chance to do what I did. And then I wouldn't be, 42 years old crying over the death of a child that I caused. I mean, think about Christine, when I post on my Instagram about my abortion, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women message me and tell me, I've never told a soul I had an abortion when I was 18. It still haunts me. I mean, I've started to screenshot them and then had to stop. It is the same story over and over. Regret, remorse, pain, unforgiveness. Why should a woman be given the opportunity to do something to herself that is harmful?
Yeah, herself and her baby.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I wish the choice was taken from me. I wish abortion would have been illegal. Then I wouldn't have even considered it.
Yeah.
Then my baby would be alive.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who are in those shoes too of, if only it had been illegal, if only I had lived in a different state, if only, I had even had the support from other people or somebody spoke life into me and empowered me. So I felt like I could do this because that's what we hear about abortion, right? It's empowering, or I love abortion, or shout your abortion.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the women, like you said in your DMs, I get those DMs too.
Yeah.
It's a lot of regret. It's a lot of your baby would have been deformed, or, your baby's going to have Down syndrome, so you should have an abortion. There's a lot of things like that I hear where people felt like they had no choice, or I was pressured, or my dad made me. I had one girl who lived with her grandfather told me that her grandfather made her get an abortion. She thought that she was only going in for a consultation. Next thing she knows, she's drugged up, has the abortion. And I don't know how far along you were in when you had yours, but something they didn't tell her, I think she was past 20 weeks, her milk came in. And because your body thinks it has given birth to a baby, and nobody told her to expect that. So her milk's coming in thinking that there's a baby there to nurture and to feed. And that baby has been taken from her by her grandfather, who essentially drugged her and had her have an abortion. I mean, I hear these stories. They're everywhere. And the people who say shout your abortion and try to make it sound empowering, when you really hear these women out and hear them behind closed doors, even the ones who shout their abortion, I am convinced when they get home at night, they're crying too, or they have some sort of a regret. And that's why they feel the need to shout it. Not everybody regrets it immediately. Sometimes it takes time to regret it, but more often than not, people do regret it, and people do feel the need to become an activist or to fight for it or become loud about it because they have to kind of like suppress what they did and make themselves feel okay about it, instead of realizing this hurt and this pain is coming from somewhere. My drug abuse or my alcohol abuse is coming from somewhere. My suicidal thoughts are coming from somewhere. And a lot of times they don't know how to connect those dots, but eventually when they do, they figure it out, then they can actually deal with it and process it. But when you're in that moment of just trying to make yourself feel okay about it, a lot of times you see those people who are and those are the ones who lash out the most, because I'm sure along with the regret stories you get the people who are also lashing out at you, saying, well, you had a choice, or whatever it is that pro-abortion trolls say. I'm sure you've heard those things too.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah. Their response sometimes is, well, of course you're against it. You already had yours. I'm like, and that mentality, that sociopathic mentality, which is, I just confessed to being devastated by it, and your response is to remind me that I did it. That lack of empathy says everything about who they are, and why we're fighting against those kind of people who think, if you call it a clump of cells, if you call it a fetus, if you take the humanity out of it, it should be a woman's choice. But really, we need to bring back the humanity of it, which is that, it's a baby, and that woman deserves the right to have her baby.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's like the shout your abortion crowd and the people who are activists. As soon as a woman says, I regret it, they're like, oh, no, you don't count anymore.
Exactly.
You had
Yep.
your abortion,
Exactly.
and you
Yeah.
chose abortion, but
Yeah.
because you regret it, you don't count.
Exactly.
And we don't want to hear from you anymore.
Yep.
You are dismissed. That's basically what they say. And it's like, no. I experienced this, and I can tell other women what happened, how I felt, and I can tell them what to expect. Even if I don't tell them what to do or what not to do, I can tell them what I've been through, and they can learn from me.
Yep.
And I think
Exactly.
that's really powerful. And I think that's so much of what it's going to be in your future with sharing this story. And I think that women are going to reach out to you continuously and tell you how you've helped them. And even people who've had regret and how they've processed through it because of the way you've shared yours, which I think is amazing. I end every episode with one question saying, if you could share how you've become bold to speak out. If you could inspire somebody to speak out, because it's not always easy. You can get demonized. You can experience cancel culture, everything we've kind of talked about in this episode. What one piece of advice would you give them to encourage them to speak out on the issue of life, on the issue of abortion, and any of their other beliefs that they hold near and dear?
I would pray very, very hard about what experience you had in life that you believe God wants you to share. I had no intention of speaking out again about my abortion. In fact, when I was writing my book, I was like, I have to tell that story because that story leads into this, which leads into this, which leads into this. So I have to tell it. Okay, well, now it's in a book and it's published and it's out there. So I'm going to use it for good. God's going to use that part of my life for good. Well, what has he done in your life? What part of your story? Every abortion story is traumatic. What part of your story does God want to use to empower women and save babies? And I think once you understand that it's God calling you into that, how could you be terrified? How could you be wrong? And how could anyone go against you?
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And you're so right. I mean, this is such a thing where we're really in a time that we need to be praying.
Yep.
And say, like, God, I need you with me right now. And, even when I do the stuff that I do in the pro-life movement, I'm sure you too, and some of the stuff that you've done, you're like, Jesus, come now.
Yeah.
Like, I need your presence right now. Yeah, all the time. But I think it's so important on this issue, especially for us to be speaking out. I know it's one of the most deemed controversial, quote unquote, controversial things. Mm-hmm. I say it's never controversial to advocate for saving babies' lives. It's always controversial to advocate to end them.
Yep.
But I think we need every single person who believes in the value of life to be speaking up. And I'm so glad that you are speaking out now, and you are there for women, and you are working with choices, and that you are being able to be this voice for people to be able to come to, because we need more women like you. We need more people standing up and saying this is not okay, and being able to use their platform for good. So for that, I thank you. And for joining us on the show, I always say us. I don't know why I say us. For joining me on the show.
You and the Holy Spirit.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining, Lindsey.
Thank you, Christine.